Hey, hey, everybody. Welcome to the Abez Show, where today we have a very unique guest. I met Tamer almost 20 years ago, and I believe Tamer is one of the most creative people I've ever known. Tamer founded and launched Jobedu. Hi, Tamer. How are you?
Hey, Abe, how you doing?
I'm
I'm good,
good. I'm
alhamdulillah.
good. So, Tamer, tell me more about you and tell me more about the story about Jobedu.
Hi, I'm Tamer Masri, founder or co-founder of Jobedu. Basically, I've always wanted to do something in the creative scene. Traditionally, or academically, I'm an international affairs specialist, political economist, but and I worked quite a few years in it. But my real passion was always and forever was the creative. So my high school friend and I, Michel Makdah, we came together and we are like, let's do something that is something that we can have fun doing and seeing it evolve. So we wanted to really create a brand more than anything, and the brand to symbolize uh, positive energy more than anything. Regardless of what shape and form it actually took at the end, I think that is just the core of our driving why we started what we started. It wasn't about t-shirts. It wasn't about any of that. It was really just wanting to do something. And then the idea about the back and forth just kept on adding layers and layers on top of the concept. And what started with let's do something, and we wanted a brand that stands for positive energy, became, hey, look, the West, we've been consuming Western pop culture for all our lives. We have culture of our own. Why don't we just do something with it? And see that came on as a layer. And then after we did that, we're like, okay, so how are we going to express it? And it was, oh, t-shirts, they travel a lot. So that means the brand starts moving and more and more eyeballs start seeing the brand. And it's like humans are walking billboards. And that's really what we wanted. We just people to associate an ideology with a graphic aesthetic. The ideology being what we call the veil of ignorance, which is a philosophy term. Veil of ignorance is how would you act if you enter the world without knowing any of the labels that you eventually learn in life.
Hmm.
A veil of ignorance. So, and how would you approach society if you didn't know who the person is, what they're from, what the color of their skin is, what their gender, any of these labels, and how would you deal human to human from a veil of ignorance perspective? From this perspective, we developed the Jobedu philosophy. So the Jobedu philosophy is for this philosophy of veil of ignorance, we use it for our customer service. It became a core part of our essence, but it really came from one of the ideas that was the building block when we first came up with the notion of let's do something.
Hmm.
But you see, but the message here is it's really just not. A lot of people ask me, and all these typical interviews, and how did you get the idea? We never got an idea. You get many ideas that build on each other, and it's like your Megatron or your like your robot thingy.
Sure. Sure.
Cool. And that's intertwined with who you become as you discover this journey, this story as well.
I think I remember the first time you even printed a T-shirt and went to Souk Jara. If I
So
can.
Jara, yeah, which is a Friday market here in Amman, and that's where we sold. And we didn't even have a brand name. We didn't have anything, man. We weren't associated with the Camel Crossing sign. It was like, hey, look, it's these people with the Camel Crossing sign. No, nobody knows who the hell we were.
Yeah,
We were we landed it somewhere, and Michelle and I, we used to stand behind the booth, and people would come up and point at the T-shirt and laugh. They don't know me. They don't know me. They don't know. There was no name like billboard thing. There was zero recognition. We're talking 14 years ago.
yeah, yeah.
That's not.
I remember I was a part of that, and I remember me and you once got into an argument. I think the
Yeah.
month you launched, saying, I want to build this brand, and I told you I don't think you're a brand yet. And then we went on like I think we argued for 2 hours, and then, you know, obviously bravo for everything that you've done. You've genuinely built
Thank you.
something very, you know, a part of society. I genuinely, especially in Jordan, at least, you know, you have a cult following generally. So I genuinely loved what you just said about, you know, how you really wanted to build this because you thought that there was an area that you can definitely, you know, explore and actually, you know, push off to the whole world. I know, you know, I know a lot of people that I work with have this whole global, you know, vision. You know, they're not super local, and I think people who know me and who've worked with me, they know I'm not a very local person, and that's why I've lived in so many different cities. But let's go back just quite a bit. And I know you said that you went to school for political science, right? But what made you, like, what triggered you to say, you know what, I'm done with this. Let me double down on Jobedu.
From 2000 till 2011, I was the political public affairs officer at the Canadian Embassy here in Amman, Jordan. And they were the coolest 5 years ever. Like I was one of the luckiest people to be in the position that I was in at the age of 23. Was an insane reality for me to live. It's a position where I used to deal a lot with the ambassador, the political the political secretary, the public affairs secretary, and I was exposed to quite a bit of things that I'm very privileged to have been part of it. Not a lot of people who study political science end up seeing how the machine works. But like just being there under the hood at the embassy, it gave me perspective on so much more that I would have not seen if I didn't have that experience. So I studied international affairs. My intention was to go study animation. I wanted to be an animator, but I couldn't because there was no industry for it in Jordan. So why study something you can't come back and study work in? So I ended up studying international affairs because that was my second like. While I was at the embassy, um, my work kind of drove me to start meeting a lot of young people who are doing awesome things. I met with a lot of these creatives in Jordan. Ahmed Hamed, he did Ikbis, and like because we didn't have really good YouTube here, so he did YouTube for us. Yalla Ikbis, and then he worked with Kareem, and he did Whatwit, which was a Twitter alternative for locally. So a lot of people, George Akra, who was the CEO of Ikbis, all of these people were doing stuff at the time that was in the creative space somehow, building whether the pipeline of like distribution of content or or making the content that will go through these pipelines.
Yeah, delivery. Yeah, I remember those days. Those were like, I call myself like a Mina entrepreneur 1.0,
Yeah.
where we there was a bunch of us, even, you know, from Jordan, and there was people as well, a couple of people from Lebanon and the UAE, and there was a lot of space to be, and there was a lot of creativity coming back then. We were limited with a couple of things: a, cash; b, talent, you know, and c, some of the technologies were not ready to be scaled. You know what I mean? Like, I remember,
Exactly,
you know what I mean?
exactly.
I know,
Like,
I remember Ikbis. I remember Ikbis, but I
but it
remember.
wasn't. It was, and like if it happened today with the connections that are today, it would be bought off by YouTube in an instant. But no connections were made. Nothing was linking all these decision makers with between innovators and investors and acquisition. None of this existed. So it was like the purity of just doing stuff. These guys did it without the even the possibility. No, wallah, I'll exit. They thought maybe I'll be big in my region,
No, I
but
think
today
people were building it.
it's different, man. Today people build with a roadmap to exit.
Yes, yes, and actually, that's one of the questions all investors ask. What is your
Yeah,
exit strategy? While people back then were building stuff for either because they can, and b, because of the need, and
yeah,
that was a different, you know what I mean. And this is, yeah, I mean, okay, I know we talk about I'm trying to keep this as less business as possible and more
Yeah,
story.
yeah, yeah.
But
But this is part of the story. This is part of this is the ecosystem in which I came to start my business. So it's the givens that, like, this is the premise of the story.
yeah, no, I agree, and this is why we want to talk about. There's a lot of people that build stuff just because they can, and people that build it because they wanted to. Let's talk more about the things that the journey of Jobedu, and you know what I mean, and what was the major learnings? What are things that and not say regret, but things that you thought that you could have done better?
I could have done everything better.
Okay.
Yani, hindsight is always 2020.
Okay.
But there is not a single thing that could have been executed better. The only difference is that there is no way that you can get the same givens, because the only way that I can do it better is because I know how I did it was turned out. With that sense, anyway, there's always zero regret.
Yeah, of course.
But it has been one epic journey. In every sense, like, epic is not always just in the epic they get wounded, quite bad.
I can say something on your behalf. I think the roller coaster that you went through with your startup, because I was a part of a lot of that journey, and it is the definition of a pure SME slash startup, where there's a lot of highs and there's a lot of lows, right?
Yeah.
And people think the second they're going to open a tech thing or they're going to open a business, people will flock in, and that obviously was not proven with any businesses I've started, and I know Jobedu was
No,
same thing as well.
Jobedu, like, the first problem that we had is that we grew digitally at an insane rate vis-a-vis what operationally we can supply.
Yeah.
Because digitally, like, at the back in the day, and because we always have to go back to the day, it was 2007. Facebook just left Mark Zuckerberg's dorm room.
Yeah.
Jobedu was one of the first pages in Jordan. It was a group. It was one of the first groups in Jordan, and we had content to push on it. And Facebook wanted that to become prominent on. It started showcasing to people. It's not the Facebook of today, where you have to pay to see for your fans to see your stuff. It was relatively market efficient from a marketing perspective to grow the brand and reach as many eyeballs as possible.
I agree.
Facebook, it was the iPhone was a novelty item, and Facebook was an app on this novelty item. Yani, everything was just geared towards you having ultimate visibility.
I agree.
But operationally, I could afford 400 t-shirts. You know what I mean? I need to sell those 400 t-shirts to make another 1,000 t-shirts. I need to sell those 1,000 t-shirts to make another 8,000, and that's it. It's been like that since 2007. Some of the learnings is, it would have been nice to have startup capital.
Yeah.
But the impossibility of it back then is, I can't even ponder that. Back then, there was no such thing as an Arab fashion brand. Back then, there were no suppliers. And you can't see suppliers in the QIZ that would never even think of looking at us. QIZ, Qualified Industrial Zone, it's where all the factories are in Jordan. They wouldn't have thought, even given us any attention. And local manufacturers, the small ones, they won't give you payment terms, and they're going to give you insane prices anyway. The bank was not even an option unless you want to put your eyeball in as collateral. Nothing would have worked out then. For me to say, I can't start this project until I get capital, it would have never happened. Today, there are enough people in the market that suppliers now give payment terms as a competitive way to get business from each other, because now there are multiple suppliers servicing the fashion industry in Jordan. Now they don't see it as they see us as a good player in the local market, and they want to work with us to produce more. Today it would have been easier to get capital because the whole industry looks different.
So you had to break down a lot of doors, and you had to seed the ecosystem.
Everything from today was started with Jobedu. This happened by It's not that. And then we looked out, and someone really showed these people that there's an industry here. No, no, we showed people that this
You proved the
works.
business.
This is a viable business. And the biggest challenge for me was, how do I maintain a brand image
With
with a
all the,
distorted supply chain?
yeah.
So
I remember a lot of stories you calling me saying, yeah, I don't have enough, I don't have
no,
enough.
but and our supply chain is nuts. So when we first started, we produced at one local manufacturer. Then he went bust, so I had to go to India. So I went to India, and I spent a year in India basically, and we set up shop with Tiru. We set up shop with Anand and Lakshman and Gopal, all of these guys in Tirupur. It was a nice factory. It was yellow, and we did our first 3 runs, and then customs in Jordan raised the customs on ready-made goods imports from 5% to 20% at the time in 2014, and then they made it 30%. So it stopped being feasible for me to produce in India. I needed to produce locally.
I hear you.
So you can see how, without capital and you're bootstrapping, and these sidewinders were like thrown our way. You could not predict these things, and it's not like it's, well, you would have known that if you had your ear to the ground. No, it's
No. You know what? I'm gonna break my rule and say shit happens, right? So, you know what I mean. I know it's one of your T-shirts as well. It says shit happens, but also keep in mind, like I want to ask you. So, I know you went through. We're talking about all these. You addressed all these little issues in the supply chain, and you were not only fixing your problems, you were fixing all of your competitors' problems as well. You know what I mean? Like collectively,
alhamdulillah.
you
That
guys.
helped, that helped us a lot at the end of the day.
Yeah, because you needed to build a whole ecosystem, and I get.
Yeah, yeah.
But what do you think was the the point, the pivotal point, or the point where you believed, okay, now I think everything is running smoother than I'm expecting. I'm not gonna say smoothly, but I'm just say smoother as but like what was that inflection point that you said, okay, you know what, now I think it's time for us to, put the pedal to the metal, as they say. And I said, like, what do you believe that is?
Okay, that's a very good question. Hello. For the longest time, um, it always felt like we're reaching that point, but then another project gets thrown in to the mix that makes you need to take jump on another learning curve. So, for instance, we in 2018 we decided, no, khalas, we're gonna stop. We're gonna set up our own factory. I want to control my supply chain. So we set up a space, and we got the fabric, and we started. We wanted to work, but then we signed with Disney.
Hmm.
Our infrastructure did not even have that remotely in mind. You know what I mean? And we wanted to control our supply chain so we don't face issues anymore. Set up a line. Let's produce 500 t-shirts a day. Hey, Disney. Uh, so you felt like you're going to be stable, you have control, and then yalla, push, metal to the pedal, whatever the saying is. Um, uh, but then Disney happened, and then Warner Brothers.
Momentum.
The momentum happened because that was all like a whole set of new firsts. We're the first fashion apparel brand to work with these amazing names. We're the first people to ever Arabize these characters for merchandising. Oh
Nice.
well, it was the first time it was ever written in Arabic.
Nice.
Like even the discussions that we're having were like amazing. Like Hulk, we call him the Green Man.
No, it's true. It's true. I agree.
So we had to have these conversations. And can we please call him Rajul Akhdar? And we couldn't.
Yeah.
But I'm like, that's how he's branded for us. And like, anyways, so you see, that was a no new learning curve. Now we're talking to the studios in with Marvel. We're talking to the New York office, trying to know these little nuances for Lucas, for Star Wars. We're talking with Lucas Art. We're dealing with them with before their next release. We were part of their episode 9 in Jordan. That was not in our radar,
Yeah,
but it was on our lap.
it's true.
So we needed to deal with it.
Yeah, no, and these are good deviations to the business, because then
Yeah.
you know what you wanted to do. So let me ask you this question. So what is, I asked this to a couple of people that we've interviewed, and what is your BHAG or Jobedu's BHAG?
What's a BHAG?
The BHAG is the big, hairy, audacious goal. Your 10 to 25-year goal.
An IP owning company.
Okay. And that's like both under the Jobedu, or is that going to be a separate entity, or like how are you going to do that?
When I work with like a collab that we did a collab with Sega, we did one with Hasbro now for Transformers in Saudi. There's so much value in IP, and it opens a lot more doors for us in terms of we can license out the IP to other people in other industries that we do not really intend to enter as our core product. So Jobedu can remain as a fashion brand, and we can have that, or it would allow me, even if I want to get out of the building and my fashion, to license out my fashion to like how Iconic Group does it with Tommy Hilfiger.
Sure.
Stuff like that, like these big brand houses, that's what they do.
Good stuff. So, okay, I'm going to throw you a curveball question. This is something that we do.
That wasn't a curveball, and the BHAG wasn't a curveball?
No, that was just the curveball.
That was an easy one, huh?
No, actually, maybe the BHAG was your curveball. This one would be an easy one for you, because I know you're a big comic book guy. So I say, if you were given a superpower, or you would like to mimic a superhero, who would that be, or what would your superhero power be? And I had some really weird responses, and some of them were super cool, and some of them made me think. So what would that be?
Well, okay. Definitely Xavier.
Okay. Like, tell people who Xavier is.
Tell them who Xavier is. Okay. So he is the people. He put the X-Men together, and he's a telepath.
Okay. Ironically, a couple of people said I telepath, but Dr. Xavier is definitely somebody that the whole genius aspect and putting together the collaborator, I would say, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a super cool superhero as well. Like, mad respect for him and X-Men. Because we're getting to that time. Would you like to give anybody some advice?
A free T-shirt?
And if you want to do a free T-shirt, and by the way,
well, how about everyone who watches the ABZ show gets a discount? I'll think shall I give you a permanent discount code that you can give all your viewers? You can give them a nice discount code.
Yes, and definitely when we launch the merch store. So,
okay,
so definitely. So, but no, I still want you to give me your one sentence of wisdom for people who are, what you went through in your last 14 years of the journey of your business.
Always remember who you're doing this for.
Okay. That's honestly, that's pretty straightforward. And I think maybe we should hashtag that. So, and talking about hashtag, we do have a hashtag for the show. It's called hashtag Real Talk No Nonsense. And again, thank you very much for coming on the show, Tamer. It was a pleasure having you. And until next time, take care. Bye-bye.